Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing the highly anticipated fourth studio album from the UK pop sensation Ellie Goulding. The album is titled Brightest Blue, and it was just released this last Friday, July 17th. And like I said, this was highly anticipated. The rollout for this record was, let's just say, it didn't really feel very pre planned. There was definitely rumblings of this album almost 2 years ago. And we got the first song from this record, Close to Me, almost 2 years ago in October of 2018. And the way she ended up dividing this record, I think, was quite interesting. I didn't think that a lot of these throwaway Spotify singles with collabs with like urban mainstream artists were going to be actually on this record. She had talked about them sort of being a sort of therapeutic experiment, fun experiment that she wanted to do while she was in the studio doing the more introspective, painstaking process of putting together this album. And so she kind of wanted to tide us over with those songs. And we got more songs. We got Hate Me in 2019 with Juice World. And then more recently, we got Worry About Me with Black Bear, which is a song that has actually grown on me a lot since it came out in the last several months, which I think is very interesting. I was not really I think it was partly due to the fact that I was just so frustrated when that song came out that we still weren't really getting the more emotional, closer to the heart Ellie that I had been wanting for so long. And we were just getting more, sexual, kind of flirty and fun pop stuff. Um, and so now, in the context of the album and knowing that I have all of that other stuff, I can appreciate songs like Worry About Me with a little bit less of a bitterness, a jaded feeling like you shouldn't be, yeah, I was just starved for that content from her for a while. And so finally getting that content makes me look at the other content with slightly fonder eyes. And then we also got Slow Grenade recently with Love. And then we have, of course, the bulk of this album with the first single, Flux, which was released way back in March of 2019. So long ago, gosh, especially with the pandemic, it just feels like 2019 was just like another lifetime in some ways, which was the song that really sold me on whatever this new project was going to be. I talk about it in my video review, which I will link in the description. I cannot gush about this song enough. Ellie at the piano and just showcasing her vocals in the most dynamic, raw, powerful way that she can is just something I'll never get tired of. The song really speaks to me. I'll get into it when I go through the track listing, but rehashing relationships in the past is a theme on this record, and the state of mind that I think Ellie was in when she was writing a lot of these songs was not the greatest, and she admits that. That actually, right after Delirium, her last album in 2015, which was sort of like her robotic pop album, she calls it. She started to realize that, she didn't feel authentic to herself anymore with her craft. She felt like she was getting a little bit lost with the tabloids saying all this crazy stuff. And then the men she was dating, it was becoming a little bit of a Taylor Swift Reputation sort of situation for her a little bit, especially in the UK. I've been doing some reading of reviews, and I didn't realize the extent, because in the US, I think she's always been comfortably pretty popular and successful. But in the UK, in the last several years, she kind of was going through what Taylor Swift went through. She was ripped to pieces in the press. I mean, the UK tabloids are just really something else. And a lot of it had to do with, Ed Sheeran and dating possibly Prince Harry. And like there was like all of these men that her name was attached to, and everyone had an opinion about all of these things. And she admits that in her 20s, was she perfect? Did she possibly do things that looking back she could have done a little better? Yeah, of course, who isn't? But it's just ridiculous how I think I didn't realize looking at it from that perspective that she kind of is having a bit of a reputation moment. And so I think that this album is great in that it showcases both angles of her talent. I think that, it's a confident record in that regard, in that, she clearly wanted to make a more introspective, melodic, singer-songwriter project, much more akin to her first two albums, which I love. But she also was like, hey, I still have a lot of success that I garnered from doing these big pop songs. And so I'm going to still ride those coattails, but I'm going to do it my own way, have a little bit more fun with the experimentation, not care so much what a record label tells me to do, just go with the influence and vibes. She talks about being very into urban and hip hop stuff like Drake and The Weeknd while she was recording this album. And you can hear that on a lot of songs on the first part, which, is the 13 songs. The second part is called Ego, and it's only 5 songs plus this overture, which I think is pretty beautiful, actually. And most of what I'm going to be talking about in this review are the 13 new songs. Well, we've got Flux in there, which is one of the 13, as well as the song Power, which was the second single. Again, it's hard to say what was the first and second single because much like Katy Perry's newest album that's coming out, there have been singles dropping like hotcakes, and it's just, what is the first single? What is the lead single anymore? Who knows? But Power is a song that has also grown on me over time. I didn't hate it upon first listen, but you can check out, I'll link in the description. I reviewed that on this channel when it came out a little over a month ago. And I was definitely intrigued by the sort of more experimental bass work that she was employing with the instrumental and the production. It reminded me a little bit more of Halcyon, which is my favorite Ellie Goulding record. And so I think it was a great sort of teaser into what we're getting. Though I'll be honest, I'm actually surprised at, I maybe my expectations were just not quite there, but I was actually surprised at how almost gospel sounding a lot of songs on this record are. There's definitely a feeling of like this could have been a live take, possibly. Like there are some more electronic songs and a little bit of flirting with urban stuff, but there's definitely a feeling of like live band, sort of soulful, smooth folktronica, as it's called a lot of the time, which kind of does harken back to her earlier style, though I don't think there's still quite the level of whimsicality that I really loved on her first album and to some extent her second. This definitely feels, it feels like a mature record for sure, but that's not to say that Lights wasn't mature either. Lights was innocent and pure in a way that I think shone brilliantly, and I think this album sometimes gets a little bit muddled and muted in terms of finding its footing, trying to say like it's a bit more edgy because it's using these pulsing electronic beats, or more importantly, it's using more urban hip hop styles, which don't always jive really well with Ellie's vocals. I think Ellie as a vocalist is so soft and shrill, not shrill. It's like a bird. It's very feminine, and she even talks about, in this one review, like in this article, basically being like, well, I've been known to have some of the most feminine voices of pop music today, and that's made me kind of be viewed as a guilty pleasure by so many artists, particularly male artists. And she really hates that double standard that because her voice is soft and kind of demure and feminine, that she gets pigeonholed into that category a little bit. And so I definitely think on this album, she was really trying to show that she can do a bit of a Christina Belt situation, that she can really be more than just a trilling, high-pitched Vogue vibrato over like a silky synth beat. And so maybe we lose a little bit of the fantastical lushness that I really love on some of her earlier stuff, but we still get it in parts. And I overall do think that this is an album that was worth the wait. I'm on the fence about quite a few songs, but there are so many standouts that will definitely bear repeats, and I will go through the track listing now. Before I do just want to point out that the Brightest Blue album cover is definitely giving me, along with a photo shoot she did where she seemed to be, donning blue makeup, and there was like a lot of layers of blue added to the photography. The Joni Mitchell album Blue is definitely an inspiration here, which is interesting because obviously she's cited Joni Mitchell as an inspiration in the past, but she also did a gorgeous cover of her hit her Christmas song River back in December, and I could have honestly even seen that song be added as like a bonus on this record. And so it was, it's interesting to see her take that. I'm wearing my blue. Blue is my favorite color, and the idea of Brightest Blue, I'm 100% on the wavelength she is with this record, especially when we get to the title track. So let's start with the first track, which is ironically called Start, featuring the rapper Serpent with Feet. This was definitely a song that Ellie, I think, knew was going to be unconventional and a bit of a left field opener for her, for fans. I think that it might be a bit divisive. It's, usually a standard for Ellie to open up the record being kind of ethereal. She's done that on her several recent albums. And this one is definitely on uneasy in parts. Like, I don't want to say it's ethereal, but it's definitely still sort of detached and airy in in certain ways with the production. Yeah, I do think that Drake definitely comes to mind when we think of the sonic inspiration for this track. I do think that this song was kind of conceived more for Serpent with Feet in mind, and so she wanted to match his style more than her own style, which is fine. I just think that the vocals of hers don't mesh as well with the production element we get. But it's a song that is growing on me. The melody, it's a little precarious in parts, um, but it does grow on you. I think once you get accustomed to the change ups you get, I mean, the song, it really kind of transforms and shifts in weird, interesting ways. Now, once again, Ellie is going in that very EDM lane here with the vocal distortion, something she embraced on Delirium and we see plenty of on this record. I'm a little on the fence with them in parts because I do think that as a trope in dance music, it's getting a little bit played out. And I don't always find it the most pleasing to listen to. Start again, start again. Like, it just doesn't do her voice any favors. And I get that it adds a moodier sentiment to the song. It's just a nitpicky thing of mine. Lyrically, the idea of wanting to restart constantly, being kind of obsessed with the idea of that, feeling as though you know that your life has become kind of messy. Maybe you're fixating on the past too much, and you're realizing that what you really need is like this huge restart button to be hit. And so you're meditating on that so much, but you find you can't fully enact the actual habitual changes to make that start feel genuine. Like, feel like I've been barely living, but I keep getting struck by the thunder. Maybe we don't need the bigger picture, because all I see is everything I've done called into question. Sorry, what was the question? And you don't know how much I missed the winter. It's been the longest summer, came without the winter. Winter? I guess it's came without the winter. I thought it was came without the winter. And you can't even begin to understand the magic she had before you killed her. So Ellie obviously is happily married now to Casper Jopling, and Ellie has spoken about how obviously almost none of these songs are about that current relationship. She feels that's almost too sacred to want to dive into yet, and she's probably going to take her a long time to want to sing about. So this is rehashing things from years ago. But I do think it is telling that, this sort of represents what she was asking for. This marriage, I think, it's comforting to know that all of this frustration actually was channeled into what really was a restart for her. And she talks about it being, on a metaphysical level too. It's not just purely about, the relationship with someone or the social stuff. It's more about like how she was thinking in her brain and spiritually feeling like she needed this reset. And I mean, saying that, I always start again, it doesn't mean that you've actually progressed anywhere. So it's sort of like wanting to actually start somewhere fresh and keep that momentum instead of constantly starting over and over again. The outro, fighting against what I'm fighting for, another walk to the liquor store. Very, I think, self-explanatory there, where that's kind of referencing. There's definitely a lot of allusions to alcohol on this record. And, it doesn't make me think that she's got an alcohol problem. And it's quite normal for people to talk about their vices. But I think this is a representation of the place that she was in mentally when a lot of these things were going down. She was probably relying a little bit too much on alcohol to cope and try and escape all of these issues she was having. So track number 2, Power. Like I said, I'm growing to like this song. In the context of the album, definitely not a skip for me whatsoever. I think that with the low pounding bass production, with her high treble vocals, very layered, like we come to expect from her, I think we've got a winning package here. And it's a song that I could see doing really well on the radio back in like 2012 or something. I just don't see in the current pop landscape this song really finding a footing, especially since Ellie Goulding is an artist who is in her, almost mid 30s now and is just a little bit off the radar, unfortunately, in terms of mainstream charts. But it definitely had that star potential. This song definitely had that magnetism. How deep is too deep? That is a good question. Starsmith produced this track. We get a lot of build-up, but not a lot of payoff with a lot of the chorus. This song takes a little while for it to really explode like you think it's going to. And on repeated listens, I sort of get it more. I just think on the first listen, I was a little thrown off by that. Lyrically, we're talking about a toxic relationship that is all too familiar for most of us. It's interesting in the Apple Music review discussion on this record, she talks about saying certain lines that she just really felt like, it's a bit unconventional or like something that you feel like you're taught not to say, which is basically, I can do so much better than you. Especially as women, I think that there is this sort of unspoken thing that you want to appear as a people pleaser, so you want to placate the ego a little bit, even if you shouldn't be, to the partner you're with. And a lot of the time, I can relate to this. It's like you're with a guy and it's sort of like, look, we've been doing this thing. It's been fun. I can tell that you're getting a lot out of this, but I'm needing more from you. This is too physical. There isn't enough emotional, spiritual connection going on. I don't really think that there's a reciprocation there. So I'm going to check out soon if you don't start to change things. And sometimes you really do need to kind of scare the other person into that because they can get very comfortable with that. And I think sometimes people don't read between the lines very well, especially men. When it comes to women, men tend to not quite pick up on, hey, I've been giving you what you want, but like, I need to know where do we really stand? Are we just going to comfortably float by and keep things really fun and casual forever? Because that's not really what I'm about. There's nothing you're doing wrong because you give me just enough. It's like you second guess yourself a lot when you're in those positions because you're thinking like, but do I want to ruin this? Like, am I being too picky? Am I pushing things too far? Should I just let things more organically happen and just like let things roll through casually? Do I have to be the one to instigate this? And I think especially since women tend to want to let the men make these first moves, traditionally, there is a bit of a pressure to just like let the men take that lead. Let things just sort of see what happens. Let that kind of just glide by. And so you're like, I don't want to ruin a possibly good thing because it's not like this guy is completely mistreating me or neglecting me. He's just not really at the level I need him to be. But I do enjoy being with him, and I don't want to screw it up. And then, you do get that moment of you're holding me tight and you say, it's getting too deep for you. And you say, wait a minute, how deep is too deep? Because you're sort of realizing like, if this is too deep for you, are you even capable of love? I think there are a lot of people coming out of relationships who have that question in their heads because they're just like looking at their track history and they're, it just is like, I don't think you're capable of love. Like, you're just not capable of that depth, that commitment, because it's a really powerful commitment. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of men who are sort of brought up to and are just inclined to be a little bit averse to that. So I really like that she's exploring that lyrically on this song. Sonically, it's not my favorite, though. Cyan, so disappointed that this is such a short interlude. We have a poem being recited. She talks about Imogen Heap and her song Hide and Seek being an inspiration. There's a song later on called Wine Drunk that I think takes a lot more of that inspiration to heart because of the effects on the voice, the delays that are employed, the choppiness of it, which I actually think is wonderfully done. I only knew I would be the strongest version of what I was first given, the strongest dose of the love I was given. Sometimes I had to trample with tears in my eyes over the things I knew I couldn't help, until I was strong enough to carry them with me instead. A root with pain, a root with joy. There should be no delusion of that magnitude. So know the truth, I am not locked in my bones. I've been changed forever, and it makes the love you've given change too. How deep is too deep? This is a perfect bridge between those two songs because the upcoming song, Love I'm Given, is sort of playing more off of this theme about overcoming adversity, overcoming breakup and hardship, and finding that you're fiercer and stronger than ever before because of it. And so Love I'm Given really kind of ecstatic, exuberant track that I think wants to leap off the page at you. And Jim Elliott, who is a longtime producer that she has worked with, and I think he's worked a lot with Marina and the Diamonds and a bunch of other artists I love, produced a lot of this. And so you definitely can hear a little bit of his influence. And this is where, like I said, a little bit of that gospel influence comes in, which I'm not particularly like crazy about, but it definitely is interesting, and I don't hate it by any means. We've got Ellie and a choir of Ellie. And so New Heights is one of the most out of her comfort zone songs, I think, because we never really quite heard her record a song of this style before. Somehow melodically it gives me sort of R&B, like Alicia Keys, If I Ain't Got You vibes. There's similarities in the chords. Not saying anything, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying like that's the kind of vibe and inspiration I'm getting. It actually does sound very New York, which she says she wrote in Soho, so I see a bit of that influence. And I think it's neat her touching on that R&B sort of jazzy style. And, you know, it's a painful realization, but so important to realize that you can achieve so much happiness and peace and contentment of mind and reach a level of yourself you never thought was powerful while being single without that baggage that you had left behind that you thought you needed to be complete. And so once you kind of are able to get over the breakup, get past all those hard feelings, you're able to start to see what you have gained and what you now have so much more control over and are better off for because of leaving that behind. Reaching these new heights, love without someone else feels right. Love for myself in this new light. There's something much deeper inside. I'm searching for a higher love, she pines in the bridge. I want to see the world before it disappears. I've gotten much wiser through the years. So this is like Ellie at 35, 34, like really just giving it to us. This is Ellie in her 30s, really confident about being single. And that's something that I really hope that when I'm in my 30s, I can attain, because I've heard that in your 20s and 30s, there's a big difference in terms of a lot of like ways you deal with like heartbreak and, you know, mental health and spirituality and just calm and contentment and happiness. There's a usually a calmness that comes over you in your 30s that makes things a little bit less full on and like make or break. So as soon as Ode to Myself started, I did get really excited. We have the sort of shimmery piano chords coming in, and the effects make it feel like you're dancing on water. There's definitely an airiness to this song that I had been looking for and searching for that we hadn't really gotten until this track on this record. And I think this separates out the latter half of this album, which I do think is the stronger portion. And Ode to Myself, although it's nothing exemplary, I think it's a great reflection on looking at yourself in the mirror, which Ellie talks about needing to do sometimes because she spends so much time writing about everything pertaining to something else that she's experienced with someone else, a person. And it's more of an interlude because there's not a whole, you know, chorus verse structure. So it fades from memory easily melodically, but important in the context of the whole record. And it leads us into one of my favorite songs that tugs at the heartstrings from the very first note. Woman. This is classic 2010 Ellie that I have been waiting to hear for so long. From that very first, I've been looking behind. She sounds like she's 10 years younger in that line because she's playing into that more innocent, lighter, softer vocal that's less processed, which I really wish we still got more of from her. There's just a nice level amount of reverb to add some mystery and space to this track, or to add some ambiance to this track, but it doesn't feel too overproduced. It's more orchestral and truly an epic power ballad. Very uplifting and empowering, particularly for women. She sings, I'm done listening to another man's music, so I'm leaving with another drink in my hand. And Ellie talks about wanting the image of that to sort of be like her saying peace out to the male obsessed music industry, because she doesn't feel like a lot of female artists get their dues compared to male artists, which I totally agree with. And this is, as you know, the song is just a conglomeration of so many emotions and thoughts, I think, from experiences she's had over the years. It's really a statement song of where she is in her 30s, as she says, fully coming into womanhood. I think that I think it reflects being newly married too. I do think that there's a melancholic element to this song. She's looking back, she sings, "Bridges were burned, all these mountains were mined, returned, but things have changed. I think I'd rather be alone tonight if that's okay. Honestly, it was time." She's, with her partner and she's really, really happy with him, but she sometimes does need to take a moment to kind of process and reflect on certain emotions that haven't fully gotten resolved yet. And that takes that sort of more introverted solitude kind of space. And so I really do see her like writing this song kind of from the perspective of now newly being married, even though I'm not entirely sure if this song actually was first written before or after that. But, singing, "I faced my fears till I made it here. Now I don't know where to stand, but I know it's not over. If I'm losing touch, if I love too much, I'll just leave it up to chance. That's just the woman I am." And ultimately, it's just like a sweet surrender to the mysteries and flows of life and realizing you can't control everything. And as soon as you realize that, the much freer and lighter you are. And I think I like that she's centering her womanhood there, because it makes it so relatable, not only just for young women, but I think feminine identifying individuals in general, to really take the time to emotionally vent out, let out in art these powerful emotions, which she does really well on this track. Another Starsmith track, we have the very alternative experimental electronic song Tides. She calls it an anti-dance record. It's got a lot of distortions, a lot of strange samplings that were kind of all compiled together. It feels a little Jackson Pollock-y in the studio because you can tell that, she's wanting it to be unconventional to the average EDM listener or the average electronic pop dance music listener. And you see a lot of these kind of artists rising up. Diplo has sort of made that style pretty popular, I think. And so I see this fitting in that vein. I definitely see it being another sort of like slightly less mainstream, but still pretty mainstream indie electronic music festival kind of fodder song. And so I do take it with a pinch of salt there. And so also the lyrics sort of take a back seat, and nothing wrong with that. But, it just doesn't feel like the lyrics have quite the same level of depth to them in other songs because they're not really the focus. Talking about being fed up with the tide changing of the relationship she is in. So I talked about Wine Drunk. I think, although it's so short, it's so powerful and captivating. "You know me so well, even the person I pretend to be. You hurt me so well, even the person I pretend to be." And she talks about it, being about a lot of times when she's, inner monologuing and she's had a little bit to drink. That's a lot of the time where inspiration for song lyrics come about. So this was sort of just a little voice memo snippet situation here that she had a lot of fun in the studio with Joe Kearns, the producer, doing some very Imogen Heap style delay and overlaying work to create a piece that really transports you, I think, sonically in its brief time span. All right. So, another wonderful tribute to an ex, we have Bleach. The simplicity around the idea of, can I bleach you from my mind? "Once upon a time, you were my sunshine. Everything about you got me goddamn wired. Started as a fleeting thing, now you're all that I can stomach. Tie my hands, I'm gripping to the stereo. Don't understand how I ended up so low. Didn't owe you anything now, I'm paying for my exit. What would it take to bleach you? What would it take to undo? 5 Hennessy's to drink you out my mind. What would it have to come to? Stuck to me like a tattoo. No remedy to leave you glorified." Being sort of, she talks about this a lot on the next track, a little bit more in the archetypal fantasy of this relationship that's obviously, I think, past quite some time ago. But realizing, there were some pretty intense feelings there. And ultimately, yeah, they treated you pretty badly. And they left you pretty broken. And you're just really trying to struggle with these romanticized fantasies that you still have in your brain about this person who treated you so badly. that you still idolize and put on this pedestal in your dreams sometimes, like maybe in a fantasy, or and it's a conflicting emotion because you hate that person, but you also are still kind of intrigued by them. You know you're never going to go back, and you've got to close that chapter. And it can get really frustrating. And I can 100% stand by this, that if there was a way to completely bleach or cause to have amnesia around a specific ex or a specific person that maybe wasn't even an ex, just someone you had a crush on that you had no business having a crush on, that you can't get out of your head deep late at night. Yeah, I can totally emphasize with the fact that, like, it doesn't really do too good to dwell on it for too long, but you gotta exercise it out. And songs like this, she does a beautiful job of that. There are some gorgeous vocal harmonies towards the end, really laying into her soft bird-like vocals there, and I am 100% here for it. I think she takes "Bleach you like a bone in a brook." I mean, what an interesting lyric. Um, a bone in a brook. Like a stream and a bone in a brook is going to bleach. I guess, bones do bleach when, they are decaying. So that's part of that. I mean, it reminds me a lot of that very sort of Edgar Allan Poe lyric we got from My Blood off of Halcyon, saying, my bones will bleed, my flesh will flee, or something along those lines. Can't quite remember it off the top of my head. But it's some of that very sort of gothic romantic imagery that she is playing with here and there. And I wish she'd explore that even more sometimes. But it definitely adds that whimsicality that I really look for in her music. So I've talked about and gushed about Flux. And again, all I really want to say is that, Ellie believes it's the saddest song she's ever written. And I definitely get a huge sense of sadness and melancholy from this song. It's a little too close to home for me because she's ruminating on the possibilities of a relationship that either she turned down or they turned down, and thinking about what ifs, kind of being filled a little bit with regret and remorse, which is never a good emotion to have if you're trying to get your mental health in the right space. She even admits that this is not a place of growth. This is a place of, like, in a way, like, decay, because you're just so hung up on the past. And I think in a way it's overly indulgent, so that she's given herself the space to be that raw and emotional and sort of say those things that she doesn't think it's healthy for her to say, but deep down she still wants to. And that's something that I can definitely relate to, in that, even if I'm happily in a relationship, at some point there are going to be moments where, either through my art or through some form of communication, I am still going to want to translate some melancholic, remorseful, like, kind of, darker, bittersweet thoughts that I still have around things hung up in the past that I need to channel out somehow. And I do think it leads to growth if you learn how to transmute it into art and look at that song and think, this was where I was at that time. I was not in a good place. I was in a state of flux. And I've grown from that. And it provides a great it provides a great comparison to hopefully see your trajectory in terms of your growth, to see where you were and to see where you possibly are now. And so as she sings, when the memories pack up and leave, it will set me free. I feel that so strongly because it really is about being bonded in a way, like bound and chained to these memories that can just weigh you down and cause so much depression. Being so caught up in the what ifs and the maybes and the buts and the potential possible futures you could see for yourself. And that ends up paralyzing you because you just stay stuck. You don't move in any direction. And she translates that emotion so brilliantly. I do really get images of, like, faded, Polaroid like relationships that never happened coming into my head. Like, it makes me think about all of these relationships that never worked. And it's hard to go through that, but it's important for me, I think, and to exercise, like I said, to sort of release all of that energy and emotion that I have tied up in all of that. So bravo to you, Ellie. I still think it's one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite, on this record. And then finally, we wrap things up with the title track, Brightest Blue. This is what takes us to that esoteric level, and also is probably the one song that is actually more about her current state of mind. Even though the world is in a bit of a rough place right now, Ellie is happily married, And she does sing about, feeling like there's a positive future ahead for her and her partner, as well as hopefully for the whole world. She sings about the blue evolution. And she talks about that being her idea of paradise. And I do like the allusion to blue being sort of like the color of not only happiness, which is kind of ironic because a lot of people attribute the color blue to sad. But, I think that blue can mean very sad things. I do think that. But I also think blue is just such a powerful color that it can also mean such an euphoric, high frequency, high vibration energy of ecstatic peace and contentment. And she's also, Ellie's very into environmentalism. So that's not something that she has been quiet about. And she talks about, the blue evolution also having a lot to do with, ironically, a sort of the green evolution, a green revolution, and finding a way to support this planet and protect it so that it does not become destroyed by us. And so she really does just lean into the utopian idealism on this track. With the chorus, the soothing synths just layer and layer, and she just really lets that lyric punch at the top with that cooing vowel, ooh, ooh. And she really lets that be the centerfold. And I think that it's Ellie Goulding synth pop 101, and it's something that I will never grow tired of from her. And so I mean, even at the end, we get a little bit of that acoustic guitar in the bridge and that softer, close to the microphone vocal, and I mean, I just feel the emotion coming through. So yeah, I love that it's so romantic. I love that it's so hopeful. And I just think it's a great way to bring out this album. We have Overture, which samples a little bit of the melody of Worry About Me. We seeg into that song. I will just say that, yeah, that song has grown on me quite a lot, like I said. The whole ego side of this record, I take it all with a pinch of salt. It's separate, it's its own thing. Sometimes I listen to it. I listen to it when I'm in the mood. Don't always feel like it really is part of the listening I want to do of the first half, but it's its own thing. But I will say my least favorite on that, and I know this might be controversial to some people, is Slow Grenade. I don't know what it is about the song, but it feels too sparse for me. And I'm a little bit more of a fond of that lush instrumentation that you get. And even if it's, very produced and synthetic, there still can be a lot of that instrumentation coming in. And there's something about Slow Grenade that just misfires for me. But that's just a personal taste, as it is with all of this. Remember, it's just my opinion. And of course, you know how I feel about Hate Me, not really feeling too much about that song. Close to Me is still, you know, it's a decent track, nothing exemplary, but it is what it is. So yeah, that whole section, the ego section, I get where she was going with it. No complaints there. But I really do think you have to sort of like consider it as like a separate thing that was just attached, like an EP attached to the real album. We kind of lose the whole Brightest Blue concept on that side, and that's okay. Just don't worry about it. I see a lot of reviewers talking about that part of the album more than they're talking about the actual album itself, and I'm like, that's a little unfair. Like, she is delivering a very, emotional and raw record. You're focusing on these collab songs. Like, they're separate for a reason. So I'm glad that there's that distance and disconnect. But I see why she put them all together. I wasn't expecting her to do that. But it's been a long road to this record, and I'm seeing it get mixed reviews for the most part. Is it her best? It's a step up from Delirium for sure. I think that Ellie still has so much untapped potential that I would like to see from her, just in terms of like all of the influences on this record are pure Ellie. Like, if she wants to go urban, that's not something that was forced on her. I have to remember that. Even though with some artists it feels a little bit like they're selling themselves a little bit, I have to remember that, she really wanted the album to sound this way. And I think that this was the album she had the most say in and the most curatorial power over. She talks about almost playing every single instrument. Like, she really had her hands in the pot here. And so I think that it just signals an evolution that I'm interested to see unfold as Ellie, kind of sheds off the robotic pop star image that, particularly in the US, she started to really dawn in the last few years, and starts to try and become a bit more avant-garde and alternative and a little bit emo again. I think that it's going to be an interesting transition, and this album signals that. So I don't think we're going to hear a new album from her from quite some time, though. But that's just because it took so long to get this one. Who knows? But yeah, Brightest Blue, I'm definitely digging it. Not every single song. I would say my least favorite might be New Heights, but that's just because I'm not so big into R&B stuff. It's great, and I do think that like performed live, it could showcase some really great vocals from her. But I would say that Woman is a little bit more my cup of tea. And so just because it has that down to earth, like kind of like folk vibe to it, that's very at the piano. And then I've gushed about Flux enough. Brightest Blue, another huge highlight. Um, and then barring the interludes, I would say the other songs I do enjoy would be like Love I'm Given and Power. Um, How Deep is Too Deep is sort of middling for me, but yeah, overall, still pretty impressed. It brought a bit of a tear to my eye in parts. Let me know your thoughts on this record and what your favorite songs were, and if you know any more info, as always, sound off in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and if you have not, subscribe. Also, if you would like to get a face mask with some custom artwork that I've created on it, along with other prints, I will link in the description my Redbubble shop, which allows you to browse to tons of designs that I have painted and made myself that you can buy as face masks or apparel or poster prints, what have you. And check it out because I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you all so much for watching once again. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Peace, love, and light. Here's to the blue evolution. Bye.